by Professor Mayer.
And in the same seam in the rock all the way around the world, whether you're looking in the Cambrian strata in China, or in the Burgess Shale in Canada, or in England, you have evidence of the sudden appearance of all the major new, what are called body plans, the new ways of arranging organs and tissues to form fundamentally new types of animals. Now, according to the Darwinian picture of the history of life, you should have this great big branching tree where one thing morphs gradually into another through small incremental variations that are produced by natural selection acting on random variations and mutations. But instead of that gradual morphing, what we see in the fossil record is a very sudden appearance of all the major forms of life, the major body plans, represented by the gold dots. The blue dots are all the missing evidence, all the things that ought to be there on Darwin's theory that aren't there, the ancestral precursors that just aren't there. So what we have is something that's very difficult. It was difficult for Darwin to explain at the time. It's very difficult to explain now, not only because the fossil record and the picture in the history of life that the fossils provide isn't consistent with Darwin's picture of the history of life, but also because of the other mystery we've already talked about. If you want to give your computer a new function, what do you have to give it? Code. You want to produce a new form of life from a pre-existing form of life, what do you have to provide for it? Code. Okay? 2 million years, 10 million years sounds like a great deal of time. But when you run the math and do the math on how difficult it is to build by chance mutations, even a single protein. Remember we ran some of those numbers in a couple lessons ago. It turns out this is just as big a problem for Darwinian evolution as it is for chemical evolution. There's not enough time, the mutation rates aren't fast enough, there's simply not enough time to search all those possible ways of arranging things to generate new proteins. So the information problem that we looked at with respect to the origin of the first life is also a problem in Darwinian or neo-Darwinian evolution. And that's a reason why I think there's evidence of design at discrete intervals further along the biological timeline. And we have this, I think, most dramatically, or very dramatically with the Cambrian, but I used to tell my students, you will know them by their euphemisms. In paleontology, there are lots of examples of geologically sudden appearances of major new groups of organisms. There's the mammalian radiation. That's the euphemism, sudden appearance. About 13 to 15 orders of new mammals come suddenly into the fossil record in the Eocene period. But before that, the big bloom, not the Big Bang, the big bloom of flowering plants in the Cretaceous. That's also a sudden appearance event. There's something called the marine Mesozoic revolution, okay? Another sudden appearance of the sea reptiles, and then the Cambrian explosion as well. So there's lots of examples of the sudden appearance of innovation in form and function in the history of life. And I think that the overall pattern is one that cannot be explained simply by the undirected mechanism of natural selection acting on random variation. So while you don't need this argument to support the case that I've been making for the existence of God, it adds additional support to see that there's other evidence of a designing intelligence acting throughout the history of life. Okay? One other little piece that adds to that picture just a bit more is this exquisite, I think these are real wonders, these miniature machines that are being discovered inside cells. This is an animation of a machine called a bacterial flagellar motor. My colleague Michael Behe has made this famous in his book, Darwin's Black Box. But this motor has O-rings and bushings and a drive shaft and a U-joint and a rotor and a stator, and it's an exquisite piece of engineering. It's a true rotary engine. It rotates in some organisms at 100,000 RPM and can turn directions on a quarter of a turn. It's hardwired into something called a signal transduction circuit, which gives the organism information from the environment that helps it direct itself towards the food it needs. And this little motor resides in a little tiny bacterium, the E. coli. You've probably heard of it from some of the hamburger scandal fame. Okay, people get sick. But anyway, what I like to say is it's high-tech in low life. Okay, exquisite machinery in a little tiny bacterium.
This bacterium motor was what I've shown you 2 weeks ago. Remember I told you 40 parts, but every part must go together. So he says it's so exquisite design. And where do you find this motor? At the back of a bacterium. he called it E. coli or any bacterium, which you cannot see with your naked eye. Bacterium is too small for you to see. So tiny is a motor, can run up to 100,000 RPM, revolutions per minute. Now, that is an exquisite motor, and we talk about it that, you know, God seems to take so much effort to do for even the simple bacterium, and you get a supermotor. In fact, we learn from these creatures, and that's how we design our motors too. Right now, let me get back to this. Are you familiar now? They call many different names, but a sudden explosion of complete creatures, no evolution. And in fact, they found that if you got your second page, you find that, I don't know whether it's clear enough, if you see there's one called figure 9, tribolite. I wonder whether you can see this. The tribolite is one little creature, it's like it looks more like a cockroach, but it inhabits the water. And this one, they said, is evolved slowly from smaller creatures. But what the evolutionists cannot explain is that the eyes of a tribolite is a super eye that can see sharper and further than any creature of that size. Then they had discovered another exquisite creature called, in figure 5, called Anomalocaris. It's very weird looking, right? Now, the eyes of this particular creature also is a super design. It can see in all directions, but an eye cannot evolve, because an eye must have all the components complete, even your glasses. If I say my glasses evolve, first there was a frame. Then I go about wearing my glasses without lenses. It's only a frame. Then after wearing it about 1 million years, suddenly the glasses appear. But you know, even a simple pair of glasses, it must come complete with a frame and a lens. Then I could make use of it. Well, these creatures got millions of parts, and it all has to come together. So this was the part that this man said, if the creatures appear suddenly completed without a process, then the theory of evolution fall apart. It cannot be proven. And even just these 2 points alone, which are very critical. So what do, evolutionists do? They don't have transition forms, like an ape becoming a man, so they must find a half ape, half man. Last week, 2 weeks back, I told you the design of an ape is entirely different from a man. Even the spine design, if an ape, you know, sometimes you see shows when an ape carry a big load like a motor car and then throw. If an ape carry a motor car, his spine will snap, because it's too thin. A man can carry, you know, even up to 500 kg, you can still hold, you know, in this competition. Why? Because of the design of the spine. It's different. Mr. Darwin did not know that scientific discovery, as they come along, would disprove his theory. And he stated all this. There must be small increments. There must be half man, half ape, half man. And they couldn't find it. So what do? They invent. To this day, they have got 6 half man, half ape examples. They call it Nebraska man. It's based on what? One little tooth found in a place called Nebraska. And when they didn't even know that this tooth belongs to a pig. And from one single tooth, they come up with this half man, half ape, called the Nebraska man. 2 weeks ago, I told you about the Piltdown man. Indeed, it was half ape and half man, but it is screwed in by a mechanic, you know. They shaved the jaw, the ape, they manufactured it. So Piltdown man was manufactured. And so are the others. They got 4 others. But every one of them is an invention. But there's one they call a Neanderthal man. But since then I've discovered that is a fully man. But smaller in size they've discovered because of disease. But Neanderthal is a real man, not half ape, half man. So there's not a single example. But I also gave you 2 weeks ago a guy called Haeckel. Haeckel's embryos. It's still found in our biology books. That was one big lie. He invented all these drawings. In real life, it is not like that. He faked it because he could not get the evidence. And he could not get the evidence because he started with this theory that he's an atheist. He really rejects Creator. Now, you misunderstand, atheists have to reject everything to do with God. And Romans 1 says, these people find God worthless. The thought about God is, the concept of God is worthless to them. So says Romans 1. And even any thought about God is not worthy to consider. So if you talk to some of them, they say, don't talk to me about God. God doesn't exist. Don't waste my time. Of course, in this case, never waste his time. But evolutionists have a concept already fixed. You must prove that he is right. If not, he'll reject it.